best in radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome. It is November 10th, 2014. It's a Monday. It's a Manipulation Monday with Andrew Hoffman. And all you have to do, if you're not sure that you believe it's a Manipulation Monday, look at the price of gold and silver. Gold is down about $20, and that should dispel all doubts. And with us is Andrew Hoffman. Actually, it's down 1840 right now. Andy, how are you?
I'm good. Actually, all you have to do is know the manipulation rule, the cartel rule that has always been all great PM days must be followed by horrible ones. And I mean, it's been going on for my 12 and a half years. There's nothing new about this. In fact, I even did the statistics this morning out of curiosity to see just how many days. And it's a huge percentage. All you have to do is look at particularly the mining shares where they really try to make sure the sentiment gets quashed as the Huey sits around its 2008 lows. But let's face it, there's a lot of things that are terrifying the powers that be right now, which is why it's even more imperative that they try to keep this under control. Remember, gold on Friday closed Friday night right under that 1183 triple bottom level. And, they're terrified because over the weekend you had this crazy Catalonia vote. On Friday, you had another horrible unemployment report. You have the upcoming Swiss referendum and countless other things that are going to cause people to want to buy gold and silver, which, by the way, is why the mint ran out of silver last week.
Yeah, they just ran out. And it's also your 12th anniversary. So, they're really shaking in their boots here, Andy.
Well, it's a double 12 anniversary. It's 12 years with my wife, and it's 12 and a half years of being all into precious metals in every manner of my business career.
That's right. So they got to really be nervous. Yeah. So the Catalonia referendum, which is quote unquote non-binding, of course, that passes over the weekend, which just showing the dissatisfaction of the masses. November 30th, I talked about this earlier in the day, Swiss referendum. I mean, that is Judgment Day. If they can't figure out how to scare the hell out of the Swiss and move them off the dime, and, basically that move will isolate the Swiss banks. They will wind up having to pull out of the U.S. and pull out of all of these fiat money schemes that they've been involved in and wind up going back to just doing what Swiss banks do best, right?
Well, more importantly, this would be a game-changing event, I think, for financial history. We talk about Catalonia and Scotland and Venice, Italy, and all these other things. All it takes is one of these things to pass, to break against the mainstream, and thus the whole world takes notice. And, again, you look at the propaganda. I saw all these polls about Catalonia. They haven't had any official ones since last year, but all last year they were polling about 55% yes, 20% no, and the rest undecided. But if you read anything in the previous last few weeks, every one of them said the same thing. Oh, no more than 2/5 of the public is for this, and it's going to be close. And I'm going, where do they come up with this stuff? No one ever said that. It's almost like they're trying to scare people into believing that the mainstream is right, that you have to keep the status quo. And sure enough, I mean, a huge turnout, nearly half of all the eligible Catalans came out, and 81% voted yes. And yes, a few months ago, the Spanish constitutional court said it's unconstitutional and thus it's non-binding. But, tell that to the hundreds of thousands of people that come out every year and shape in a V in the middle of Barcelona because they want out so badly. They're going to eventually leave. And with it, they're going to take with them 20% of Spain's GDP and 25% of its tax revenues, which is going to blow apart Spain, which is already dying, and it's going to probably blow apart the European Union. So it's coming. And again, the more important thing is that people around the world see this. I mean, Scotland was just shot across the bow. Frankly, I didn't even know about the Scotland thing until it came up. But this was a big deal in Spain. And as you said, that it's a preliminary to what's coming up in 3 weeks in Switzerland. And again, that propaganda is hot and heavy. They canceled the PayPal account where foreigners can contribute to the Yes cause, and they're trying to make it seem like people are not really into it. But we know better. We know the initial polls are in favor of yes. We know all you need to do is keep your eye on that Euro-Swiss exchange rate, which this morning the euro hit a 2-year low against the Swiss franc. It's almost down to the peg level. And what I'm trying to say is that the market is already starting to speculate that this referendum is going to pass, because if it does, that's going to be the end of the peg, and the Swiss currency is going to soar. And again, I'm sorry to keep talking over, without you asking questions, but everyone is writing things like, well, the cartel is trying to keep gold down in front of this Swiss referendum so that the Swiss won't buy gold. And yes, of course, that's true. Although, yes, the Swiss people understand gold. They're not going to be that easily scared off. But more importantly, no one is focusing on the fact that equally important to the Swiss is the fact that the euro, which the Switzerland franc is pegged to, is crashing right now. It's at the lowest point since they made the currency peg. I put a chart in one of my articles last week showing the Swiss National Bank balance sheet has nearly tripled in the 3 years since they made the peg, and the euro has fallen 17%. That's what the Swiss people are looking at right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're better educated than most of Europe, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They know this stuff. And this is an armed populace. Everybody in Switzerland, 90-something% are armed, have a gun. And, they're well versed in the history of Switzerland. They're well educated, better educated than the rest of Europe. And I'm telling you, I think they're going to go for it. We'll see if somehow the country can figure out a loophole to try to repudiate the vote. But my guess is they're going to do it, and I think that's what you're seeing here. With the Swiss franc appreciating, the euro going down, I think it's all tied in with that, Andy.
Yeah,
I think this is huge.
I agree absolutely. There's no way there's going to be a loophole. Like, again, the people. I wouldn't overestimate their knowledge of money. I mean, yes, the bankers do, but from all I read, there's just as many clueless people in Switzerland about money and gold as there are in Germany and China and everywhere else. There's plenty of them out there. But one thing they do know is direct democracy. And for those that are fearing, there's going to be tampering and they're going to rig the election. No, they're not going to rig the election. It's going to be a real election. And no, there's going to be no loopholes. It's going to happen. The question is, will they vote for it? And, I'm not going to speculate just because the initial polls were yes, what's going to happen. But I can tell you this, I can bet it's going to be really, really close either way. And if the powers that be start to lose control of financial markets, as they temporarily did in October before they, went berserk with their manipulation, jawboning, and prayer, it's going to be that much more toward the favor of gold. I wrote last week an article called "The 3 Death Trends." Okay, these are things that the powers that be, the PPTs of the world, the central banks, the cartels, have not been able to stop, and they're far larger than simply goosing the Dow Jones propaganda average or holding down paper gold by hitting it at the same time of day with naked future shorting. And that is, one, the collapse of oil prices, which is causing major geopolitical and economic splintering around the world as we speak. And it's going to get a lot worse as prices go lower. And then the second thing, which I've deemed in an article about a month ago, the single most precious metal bullish factor imaginable, which is the wild currency volatility, and in most cases, currency crashes that are being caused by this fiat currency system. I mean, look, at this point in time, we're talking about massive multi-year, and in many cases, record lows for major currencies from the yen, the Indian rupee. You look at the Fragile Five, which are down 40% on average since the Fed started its major money printing campaign 3 years ago. I mean, we're talking about some major inflation around the world and geopolitical tensions. And of course, the third one, which ties into that, is the currency wars, which is exactly what Japan initiated last week, what the ECB initiated the week before, and what the Fed is going to be forced to initiate now that the, quote, strong dollar is causing misery for corporate America.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. The instability of the system is really the final thing that's going to do it in. No question about it. Because, it's a stable currency is really crucial to a country's ability to grow and to prosper. And when you have instability, that really undermines the whole country's prosperity.
Well, it's no coincidence that real median income and wages peaked in the early 1970s, as did the labor participation rate, as did the manufacturing sector in the West compared to the East. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to see the correlations, or for that matter, the debt explosion. All that comes around to when the gold standard was abandoned, and the whole world is feeling this pain right now. But the other currencies that are not reserve currencies will always feel it first and most. But everyone is feeling, and eventually it's going to get around and destroy the whole system. And we're seeing it as we speak. And I can't emphasize enough the fact that out of the blue, seemingly out of the blue, we're talking about Scotland, Catalonia, the Switzerland thing. Venice, Italy wants to secede. The fact that all these countries, states, nations want to get out of the system shows you that how dire the situation is, how close it is to the end. Someone is going to escape the system one way or the other, and others are going to follow them. And that's why the powers that be are so terrified of the financial markets, which are their last bastion, these manipulated markets of stability.
Yeah, it's like the hotel. It's become the Hotel California economic system. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave, right?
Right. It's Peter Schiff's Roach Motel thing.
Yeah.
And by the way,
so
I'll
true.
give some kudos to Peter because he's really, he is really out there. I mean, we're out there. I'm out there in the alternative media world, but he's out there on CNBC and the brutal vultures of the world just attacking him on television and radio for being right and ignoring all the things that he said. Because, I mean, as you know, and I certainly know, it's very, very difficult being public with non-mainstream views in a manipulated world.
Yeah, and because you could be right, but you're almost certainly not going to be right at the exact time that they're looking at it. It just can't be done,
And more importantly, I mean, you are a Cassandra. You're hated even more when you are right than when you're not right. So when things crash, some people will give him kudos and say he was right, but people will hate him more because they're in bad shape and he's in good shape. And that's the way of the world. We're not populist over here. I mean, we are freedom fighters.
Yeah, that's the truth. That is the truth. And yeah, you're so right about that, when you are right, then you're really in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, you have to just be happy when you're right in this kind of world, as we were for many years, to know that you've protected yourself and the 1 or 2% that have listened to you understand you. But I remember I wrote an article. I get so many emails from people over time saying, I can't convince my parents, my friend. And I said, just read this article. It's called Family, Friends, and Colleagues. I wrote it 2 or 3 years ago. I said, I've given up. I don't even talk to anyone about the topic unless they come to me. And frankly, the only people that come to me through the blog, through my business. It's not in everyday life where you find someone who cares about real money.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, Andy, I was at a party on the weekend, and sure enough, there were like a number of libertarians there, if you could believe it, and all people like you who are very concerned about what's coming up next. And I had to tell them it ain't going to be pretty, because we've just gone too far down the rat hole. The manipulation and the sabotaging of markets, the manipulation of them, and all the other bad things that have happened here. There's just no saving it.
Well, the growth of our community is very strong, but it's kind of like equating it to like where Chinese GDP was, let's say 20 years ago. They start every year reporting a 15-20% increase in GDP, but coming off a very small base.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that the community of people who understand real money, and not just real money, but who understand the economic truth of the world, is growing rapidly around the world. Thank God for the internet. and the alternative media, but it's coming off a small base. And I don't think it's ever going to be, outside of maybe China and a few, or India, it's ever going to be more than, 2% of the public in the Western world.
Yeah, eventually, I think we'll do better than that, because eventually,
Well, when the system goes, yes.
Well, it'll be too late, but
when the system goes, everyone will know the difference in premiums between a silver buffalo and a silver libertad and a silver maple leaf, and they'll know exactly how much silver content there is in a junk dime. But until that time, I don't think it's going to be more than a pittance of people.
You're right. You're right. Yeah, but we've got a long ways to go for sure. And hey, looking at these stories from over the weekend, it's totally understandable. I mean, the jobs number, just a complete joke. I mean, most of those jobs, right? Like 2/3 of them from the birth death.
Well, I mean, the job thing is getting so comical that I've been now, it's either 3 or 4 months in a row, I've been writing right before I'll bet you it'll be better than expected, worse than expected. And I've been right every time, because it becomes so obvious when you're watching the manipulations, what is important to the powers that be at any given time. Like if they see interest rates moving up too fast, they got to make it a bad number. If they're moving down too fast, a good number. When it was the last report before the election, you knew it had to be, and I don't mean good, I mean, quote, better than expected. Yeah. So, so now the elections are over, and let's make a statement because the Republicans in charge that it's bad. And of course you see the economic data that we've seen for the last month, which is screaming down. And, you look at the numbers, rigged or not, they were horrible. It was, first of all, I want to know, even in the government accounting, how you can say, look, the labor participation rate hit a 38-year low or 36-year low last month. This month, it slightly ticked up by like 0.1%. But the fact is, you had a higher labor participation rate than last month. You also had lower than expected job creation. Right. So in both cases, the numerator and the denominator, you would think you should have a higher unemployment rate. And yet he reported a lower unemployment rate. And I'm going, what seasonal adjustment factor can you make that makes a higher numerator and denominator into a lower number? But they actually managed to do that. And as you said, yes, 137,000 of the jobs were birth death. And, you look at the internals as always, and it's all, in fact, there was so many waiters and bartenders that they're now about to pass the amount of manufacturing jobs in the country. And of course, we know that those jobs are not full-time jobs. They're not, they're not even minimum wage paying jobs. If you're a waiter and a bartender, they don't pay anything. You have to be lucky to be charming and get good tips. All for age 55 and above. It's people who can't retire. That's where, again, people, I can't emphasize this point enough. This is the numbers that come from the government, okay? This is not us speculating, trying to spin it in our way. If you look at the government numbers since 2008 crash, all of the job creation, not some, not 60%, 30%, every single new job has come from the 55 plus age category, and every other category across the board has been down, which means it's simply senior citizens that can't afford retirement taking minimum wage jobs from teenagers and 20-year-olds who graduate from college. But the best part, if you want to see how screwed up these numbers are with these adjustments, in this particular report, it goes side by side with what's something that's called the household jobs report, where they survey more people in households. I don't even know exactly how they do it. And they came up and said in September, this is September we're talking about, October, sorry. They said there was a seasonally adjusted 528,000 job increase in the 16 to 24 age group. So they're saying that more than 500,000 people who were in college and high school age got jobs when school went back into session. That's how unbelievable these adjustments are. And better yet, we look at these, these diffusion indices. I call them island of lies because they literally just make up the stuff.
Yeah.
There was one of these reports last week, I think the PMI, where they showed the employment component higher. In fact, it was the highest employment component since like the top of the economy in 2007. The problem was, if you look at the hard data, It was the worst print all year. It was terrible. But they created a seasonal adjustment factor. And again, they're adjusting answers, which are yes, no, or maybe questions.
Yeah.
And they turned the worst hard data all year into the best report in 10 years.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, well,
right.
This is the way we do things in the new economy, try to pull the wool over their eyes. And, there's just nothing good on the horizon here. And, it just amazes me that that the story of such strong physical demand, just gets eclipsed by the fact that, the prices get driven down and the lowest prices in 4 years. Then who the heck is buying all this gold and silver? That's what I want to know. Who's buying it? And the answer is quite obvious, isn't it?
Yes. Look, it's not Americans that are buying it. Miles Franklin is one of the largest bullion dealers in the country. And yes, business is certainly better in August, September, October than it was the rest of the year. But, it's a pittance compared to where it was in 2012 or 2011. And and again, it's, the funny thing is that the demand out of the mint, the actual sales in the mint were far less in 2011 and 2012 than they were today. And we talk about the shortages of 2008. Well, demand is far greater now. I mean, far greater now than there was in 2008. And this is on a worldwide level. There's no doubt that 2013's record level of both global gold and silver demand is going to be at least matched this year. And certainly, if you look at the U.S. and Royal Canadian mints, which are going to blow away, and assuming that they actually reopen again and sell anything, last year's numbers, the last few months, Chinese import numbers have been higher than the entire global mine production. There's so many things. You look at the massive drawdowns now we're seeing in, for instance, COMEX Gold and Silver, the GLD, the Shanghai Silver Exchange. This ridiculous, the backwardation in gold and silver is the biggest it's been in 15 years. The ratio of COMEX open interest to price is as high as it's ever been. The commercial shorts are getting close to reducing the shorts to zero. So across the board on the demand side, it would seem that there's going to be some kind of shortage soon. And, certainly we're seeing it to some extent in silver right now. But can this paper game go on much longer with all of these things going on, in the supply demand realm and the geopolitical and economic trends? Boy, it's hard to believe we got this far. It's even harder to believe there's that much more left.
Yeah, I just can't see it happening. But hey, they've amazed us to this point. They could go on amazing us for a while longer, but we will see. Anyway, find Andy's work over at milesfranklin.com. Subscribe to his daily missive, and financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Subscribe to our free newsletter and check out the site while you're there. Got sources from all over the internet, information that you're just not going to find on the mainstream media. And on that note, Andy, we will catch you next week. Be well.
Look forward to it. Thanks.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.